Easy Tricks. Today's video is about a poem, A Tiger in the Zoo, written by Leslie Norris. You'll find this poem in 10th grade CBSE textbook, The First Flight. If you're writing your 10th grade CBSE examination in English, it is always recommended that you learn lessons in English language. It will be more convenient for you to remember the answers during the examination. So let's start the poem. Before that, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. George Leslie Norris was prize-winning Welsh poet and short story writer. Norris is considered one of the most important Welsh writers of the post-war period, and his literary publications have won many prizes. The poem, A Tiger in the Zoo, has three themes to it. Number one is animals are victims of human cruelty. Number two is the most ferocious creature turned into a quiet and disinterested animal due to the change in natural habitat. Number 3, author has succeeded in gaining sympathy towards the caged animal who are imprisoned only for human entertainment. The poem has 5 stanzas in it. In the first stanza, the poet gives us a picture of tiger being caged in the zoo. In the second and third stanza, the poet makes us understand the actual behavior of the tiger, how it should be in its natural habitat, that is in the forest. In the fourth and the fifth stanza, the poet brings back the reader to the zoo to make them understand change in the behavior of the tiger due to caging. Let's read the first stanza. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. The first stanza starts with the introduction of a tiger in the zoo by focusing on his physical appearance. The tiger here is being described as bright, deep color who has a stripes or black color bands on its body. And the tiger is stalking, which means he is following people and animal around him closely without getting noticed in his small cage. So now how do we get to know this cage is small? Here the sentence is used that the tiger is walking few steps inside the cage. So this tells us that the cage is very small for the tiger to walk around. This tiger is walking on its pad and no one can hear him because his pads are as smooth as velvet fabric. Here the poet has compared the pads of tiger with velvet fabric. If you look at these two pictures, they both look same. This is velvet fabric and these are the pads of the tiger. They are same, they are smooth. That's the reason no one can hear him walking around. But there is another reason why no one can hear this tiger walking around, why the tiger is so quiet. The reason behind that is this tiger is angry. The last line says, in his quiet rage. The tiger here is angry because he is being forced to stay in this small cage. Let's read second stanza. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass, near the water hole where plump deer pass. We learn that the tiger is not happy in the first stanza because it is being caged, and the second stanza explains us more clearly why this tiger in the zoo is not happy. Why is it angry? So by nature, the tiger is supposed to hunt and eat. So the actual tiger hides behind the bushes, and the word lurking is used in this para to tell us that the tiger remains hidden till the prey approaches. And he slides or moves smoothly through the long grasses to avoid getting noticed and the prey getting alarmed. These long grasses are near the water bodies like lakes, rivers, etc. Where this fat or plump deers, they come near to these water bodies to drink some water. And that's when the tiger attacks these deers. So this all seems so natural, the way the tiger lives in the forest. But what happens to the tiger in the zoo? It cannot do all the stuffs inside the zoo because it is getting the food which is already ready-made. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. The poet says that the tiger, instead of getting caged, should have been in the forest. He should be making warning sounds, which means snarling sounds, by going near to these houses located at the boundaries of the forest. He should have been showing his white, sharp teeth and his claws to scare the villagers. But at present, he is locked in the cage. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. From the previous stanza, we understood what the tigers can do in their natural habitat. The poet in this stanza takes us back to the reality that this tiger is no more in the forest. It's been locked in the concrete jail. That is, it's been locked behind the solid cage from which it cannot escape. Along with him, his strength is also being locked behind the bar. That's the reason the tiger feels helpless. All he can do is stalk or walk around quietly in the cage. That's the only length he can walk inside the cage. He is so disinterested that it doesn't matter who the visitors are. People here are coming to see the tiger and getting amused. But this doesn't make the tiger happy because it's not in its natural habitat. All that tiger can do at present is ignoring these visitors. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. In the previous stanza, we learned the caged tiger's activity during the day. Now when it is night, what does this tiger do in the cage? As it is being confined and has nothing to do inside the cage, right? Look at the helplessness of this tiger. The poet explains us that the tiger hears the voice from outside the cage, and the last voice that it hears at night is of the patrolling cars. These are the police cars which goes around the city for the safety of the people. And when these car sounds also fade, it has nothing to do at all. It just stares at the bright stars in the sky with its eyes, which are as bright as the stars. You can feel the pain of the caged tiger in this stanza. The message of this poem is very clear. The wild animals' home are their natural habitat. They are not made for zoo. They are caged in the zoo for the human entertainment, which is affecting them physically as well as mentally. Even for the sake of argument, if we are saying that we are trying to protect this endangered species by caging them in the zoo, this act will still not justify the loneliness they feel in the zoo all alone. Let's look at the literary device of the poem. Let's start with the rhyming scheme. The word stripe of the first line does not rhyme with any other end word of the stanza. So we will mark this word as A. The word cage of the second line rhymes with rage. Let us mark this both lines as B. Next, the line 3, which has got quiet as the end word, does not rhyme with any other word of this stanza. So we will mark this as C. If you look into the entire poem, this is the same rhyming scheme you will find throughout. That is A, B, C, B throughout all the 5 stanzas. Look at the next literary device here, which is personification. Personification is when you give an animal or object qualities or abilities that only human can have. So in this poem, the tiger is being repeatedly called as he instead of it. Look at this line. He stalks in his vivid stripes. He should be lurking in shadow. He should be snarling around houses. All this line calls the tiger as he instead of it. Enjambment is our next literary device of the poem. Enjambment is the continuation of the sentence or phrase beyond the end of line or verses. If you look at this stanza, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plum deer pass, you do not see any punctuation mark between this first and second line. This means the idea has continued from the first line to second, and from second line it has continued to third line. There is no breaking of the sentence in between. The next literary device is imagery. Imagery is the formation of mental image or picture. When you read this poem, you will get the picture of what is happening in the scene. So in this stanza, if you read, you will get an image or the scene which is happening at the night in the presence of the stars, and the tiger is staring at the stars. So when you start imagining this kind of scene, reading a poem, this is what we call it as imagery. Consonants is our next literary device. Consonants is a repetition of similar consonant sounds within a word, sentence or phrases. Look at this example here. He stalks in his vivid stripes. His strengths behind bar. The sound of S is being repeated in the first line with the word stalks and stripes, and you will also find the same sound in the word his. Similarly, you will find the sound of B in the word behind and bars. So this is consonants, the repetition of consonant sounds within a sentence. The next literary device is assonance. Assonance is repetition of similar vowel sound within a word, sentence or phrase. So here in this line, he stalks in his vivid stripes. The sound of I is very prominent. You can find that sound in his vivid stripes everywhere in this line. So this is a very good example of assonance. Oxymoron is our next literary device. Oxymoron is using two opposite adjectives. In this line, in his quiet rage are two opposite words or adjectives. Rage is getting angry. So when you get angry, you will never be quiet, right? You get frustrated, you scream, you make lots of noises, right? Even the tiger does the same thing. So but here, the word quiet is used along with the rage. So this is a good example of oxymoron, where the tiger is angry but he's still quiet. Metaphor is also being used here in this poem as a literary device. Metaphor is a figure of speech which directly refers to one thing by mentioning the other. So to understand this very clearly, we need to read this line, on pads of velvet quiet. Here, the pads of the tiger is being compared with the velvet fabric directly. So the poet mentions the velvet fiber and he is connecting this fiber with the smoothness of the pads of the tiger. Alliteration. This is a literary device where you can find the repetition of identical initial consonant sound. Now don't get confused with the consonants. Consonants is also a literary device where there is a repetition of consonant sound, but the repetition of the sound can be in between or at the end as well, but not with alliteration. For alliteration to be called as alliteration, the sound repetition should be in the beginning of the word. Like for example, concrete cell. You see the sound of C is being repeated in the starting of both the words. And the other example over here is behind bars. The sound of B is repeated in the starting of the word. Okay, so this is the best example of alliteration. The last literary device of this poem is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia are the words which denotes the sound. In this sentence, he should be snarling around houses. Snarling is a sound which has been created by the tiger when it is angry. As such, the word has no meaning. It is just the sound of the tiger. So this is example of onomatopoeia. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions related to this poem or any other lesson, do comment below. And if you are new to this channel, please subscribe so that you can get the notification for our next video. Thank you.